Welcome. This is the February 20th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Dan, Simon, Jan, Tomek, Mark, and myself, Michael. And let's just go through some super quick news first. One, snaps to Andrew. He has OpenSense and Ubuntu working well in bhyve under Illumos. Snaps to Dan. His new router is almost ready for deployment. It's still in lab mode, but going great.
To be clear
Yes.
on that point,
Oh, Hans, welcome. Yes.
Prominent uses pfSense on bhyve up one side and down the other. We have like 50, 100 instances. So that works well too. So
Awesome.
seeing OpenSense working was not a shock.
Fair enough. I know many people using it with great success. And Dan, will your router be running something like OpenSense or raw FreeBSD?
Raw FreeBSD, that was the major goal.
Sweet.
So it's 4 Atom processors on one chip, 32 gig of ECC RAM, and 2 1 terabyte mirrored NVMe drives.
Nice.
So I should have enough to log my traffic.
Sweet. Love it. So in working with Alexei, he pointed out that, bhyve.org is woefully out of date, and I will be first to admit that. The backstory is that I hosted the FAQ on that site and maintained it, and then someone said put it on the wiki, and it went there to kind of rot away, and then the site has not received much love. If someone has a vested interest in helping out with that, let's talk. I'll leave it at that. Briefly from the enterprise working group call yesterday, Ed Mast is looking at updating LibVirt in bhyve. Related, VirtManager shipped 5.0, I believe a week or two ago. It remains to be seen how easily that will be updated in ports for FreeBSD. And I have a narrative only. The foundation is looking for a contract for a web-based bhyve manager. What that means, I cannot say, and I don't know if they published any details. I bumped into, or maybe it was from Alexei, the anti-detection for QEMU and Proxmox, which was somewhat fascinating and comes up in the topics of, say, GPU pass-through. So let's take a quick peek at the Proxmox one. And the idea is to have little shims that make a system, a virtual machine, look more authentically like a hardware system. So instead of QEMU keyboard, as the example in the original docs there for the QEMU one, it's like, let's make it an Asus keyboard, and anyone sniffing for that shouldn't care. That certainly reminds me of Antranik's Illuria honeypot, which is a series of jails pretending to be a whole bunch of network resources on independent machines. In that case, jails do the job. I'm sure there are cases where you want, well, obviously a virtual machine, and this is a great sample of the data collection in Windows. So you can retrieve some authentic hardware information and then find places for it, some of which could probably be done with bhyve-o flags, but I suspect there are some things that need to be either slammed in HCPI tables and other little places. But this is inspiring insofar as there are probably some real world use cases for that. Any observations, pardon the nasty language there, any observations, questions, experiences with such things of either being burned by the fact that a VM shows up as a non-authentic system, hardware system, or otherwise?
Well,
yes.
Once you have GPU pass through for Windows working, one of the more tempting use cases would be virtualized gaming setups. And here you will run into any kernel level, or at least kernel supported anti-cheat complaining about virtual machines, because once you're virtualizing your operating system, it's more or less trivial to write the old-fashioned game state editor to just cheat. And the guest operating system can't really defend itself against the hypervisor writing into its memory unless you have something like AMD SEV for memory encryption. But even that can be bypassed unless it's completely attested and set up and there's
Sure.
no exploit and so on. Yeah. So basically, if certain games detect that they're running in a virtual machine, they will consider you a cheater by default. Do whatever they do with them.
Cool.
The
And that came up on the
funnier
last call
solutions
for
is
those
to
who stuck
just
around for the live parts. Go ahead, Jan.
have that show up in the matchmaking so that suspected cheaters only play other suspected cheaters, so that they don't bother the rest of the
I see.
audience.
A lot
But
of
the
time.
nastier ones will ban you and potentially ban your any associated account platform wide. Like,
Yeah, usually
yeah.
what I've seen is that, and it's almost always competitive shooter type stuff, which is not my thing. So
Yep.
most games do not care. It's just like stuff like CS:GO and whatnot.
But some games even do it for single player just to be annoying, because they tied that into the what they consider copy protection.
Well, I mean, that's a good way to not have to decrease your customer count.
Cool. Keeping it on topic, is there anything else on the whole notion of providing a more authentic virtual machine that is less distinguishable from real hardware?
Basically, avoid power virtualized drivers. So use something like
I saw your points there. I
HCI
included
or
them. Yep.
NVMe emulation instead of VirtIO block or net. Use the EM1000 instead of VirtIO
Yep.
net. But bhyve may not have enough knobs to disable every place where it quite obviously represents itself. The other stuff you can do is if you use the extender, the bhyve config instead of just the command line options, or if you pass individual config key value pairs to the command line, then you can fill in a bunch of OEM information, which is normally filled with something like QEMO or something, or VMware default values to make it easy for the operating system to apply appropriate behavior for virtual machines, which is normally what you want. But if you have a particular annoying application which fights you, then yeah, maybe you have to fight back.
Yep. So, Mike, welcome. You chimed in with a question about TPM requirements, and lucky you, Hans has joined, and Hans kindly ported the, I believe, IBM provided TPM firmware blob that had a nice license, if I got that right, and then bolted that onto FreeBSD, and it should be available in 15, possibly 14. Would it be 4? Hans, could you just give a quick overview of that work and get us excited?
I tried it on 14, didn't have much luck. So yeah, please.
So you tried it on, oh, well, it's only in 15, so you have to run 15 current, and there are snapshots.
I have a
wait for that.
version of 15 installed on bare metal. So yeah.
Oh, and you tried that?
Not recently. I would like to try it again, but if you can just let me know if it works or not, then that'd be great.
Okay, Hans, where's the best source of documentation? The related manual page or the review or somewhere else?
Which work exactly are we talking about? Is that the software TPM stuff or?
Yeah, the emulation, I believe.
Yeah, because Windows will complain there's no PMP or TMP, and so you can't install it.
Wow. That's a good question. I don't remember whether I added anything in the man pages. Definitely there was something in the
in the which man page? In the actual bhyve man page?
I think so.
Okay, I'll have another look. But if you have some more concrete info, I would appreciate that.
So, but the bhyve man page tells you what you need to tell bhyve where to find the software TPM. I'm not sure the actual software TPM stuff is documented anywhere but in the software TPM documentation. I can probably, I had the command line, an example command line in the pull request. I don't think that ever made it into any man pages.
I'm looking up the review right now.
PM, if you give it a socket, or tell it to listen on a socket, and then tell bhyve where to look for that.
Should we be able to Google this stuff around?
I'm
Repeat
sorry, what?
that?
I should be able to Google like the exact command and all the details around somewhere.
Yeah. Give me a second to.
I think I found the review. I'll put it in the chat here and put it in the doc. So
Okay.
there's the review.
Okay. Well, thanks. Oh.
Yeah, and often you'll find that reviews have a whole bunch of additional information that never arrives in the like succinct, like manual documentation. So it's because it's more debuggy, and that's often more useful. But
I would put an example command line for software TPM into a bhyve man page, right? So yeah,
that'd be nice.
And I've found the software TPM documentation. Well, it's complete, it's a lot, and it took me a while to figure it out. It wasn't quite obvious. So
well, drop in a link to that if you have it. Would that be at the IBM page or a QEMU page or somewhere else entirely, just to send us in the right direction?
Give me a second.
Great.
Okay,
I'll bring this up.
I'll try to play around with it on modern snapshot, and that SWTPM command is in port somewhere.
I think the payload, yes. Goran ported the payload itself to ports some time ago, and then Hans bolted it in with this work. And here's the review for that work, which does have some.
Yeah, that's a
syntax.
Yep, that's what I'm looking at. Yep. Okay. Cool. I'll give that a shot. Thanks.
Sure, great. And do let us know, because that's come up a few times this week, ironically, especially with the in theory October 10th death of Windows 10 support. Yeah. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, all the versions 11 and up. Same with server. You can't install it.
Got it. Okay, well, I'll put this in here. I'll lose that tab. Thank you for bringing that up. Your timing is perfect. Which also Hans segues into. Let's see. I don't want to. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I took a moment to think about 14.3 goals, and what I said earlier, maybe it could land in 14.3, possibly if MSC'd.
See, I saw this TPM emulation stuff being worked in there somewhere, but I couldn't get it working. But okay.
So yeah, actually, very briefly, the Enterprise Working Group mentioned a bug about the VirtIO driver, perhaps on KVM, and it seemed to be like an ancient issue that's been getting some recent attention. I'll just throw it out there as we go to the next list of things we want to check off the list for.
This is the camera.
Welcome, someone new. So for what it's worth, I don't know if anyone's seen this ancient issue, but it's getting some attention like right now.
Wow, that's 2012.
It is, I know, but then thank you, Mark's on the call. Welcome. Let me punch down to the end here. It was then tickled, I think, either this month or last month. Tom Jones. Okay, so it was, yeah, not very long ago. Tom Jones took a peek at it.
Okay.
So
cool.
I will
Thanks,
put this in the chat for everyone. It's above my pay grade to really dive into that one. But let's briefly, while we have Hans, go through some topics. So there was a Red Hat glibc bug that bit a bunch of people, and it sounds like Kib and company at the foundation attacked that and made some good progress. Has anyone used that in practice and production? Hopefully that's all sorted. TPM emulation.
Is it Linux based or the new Linux Later binaries?
It seems to be when virtualizing a Linux, which was a surprise.
Okay, sorry.
That should never be a problem, but it was a problem.
Okay.
Then there was a TPM emulation, test it. I will keep working on funding Hans for your work. Along with the glibc work, the foundation and team did a whole bunch of AMD IO MMU work. I sure hope that's getting tested. I hope it solves the issues that Santiago is really suffering with. And I cannot say if that can be MFC'd, but that is exciting and making progress. Emil could not join this week, but hopes to have some news next week for VirtIO FS, which came up not too long ago. And Jan, you've just shared a link. What's that going to. That-
Asking if this is the exact arc you're mentioning.
of the glibc, or
Yes.
there's a very good chance it is because it came up recently. Go ahead and verify that. I'll fix it if it's wrong. So Alex and I, let's see if he can join. He hasn't. Different Alexander's here. Welcome.
Yeah, hello.
Go ahead and you are here too. I'm looking at the
Yeah,
list.
I just
Awesome.
joined.
Welcome. Cool. Well, we're going through a list of desired features for 14. Then we'll get into CUDA, and then we'll get into our work together. So going down.
I kind of missed the meeting. I'm sorry.
No worries. Read the doc. It's here. I'll put the doc in chat. It's always a great place to catch up, and I'll try to keep it synchronized with the conversation. So moving on, thank you so much for all of your work, Alexi, on all things GPU pass-through. We'll get to that in a minute. You just shared a new utility for stripping out and the BIOS goodies. ARM64, I have the things I want to test, but I do not know if things like PCI pass-through are working. I don't know if the limit of 16 vCPUs has been removed, etc.
I can probably also try that out for you too.
Awesome.
Fairly recent AMD hardware.
That would be great. I've put what I know on the wiki. Steal it from there and report back, and I'll factor in whatever
I'm going to
info.
currently reboot to FreeBSD.
Okay.
Okay. EDK2, Alexi, you pointed out that the December 2024 firmware is not quite in either bhyve firmware land or otherwise.
Yeah. There are bhyve patches in EDK2,
okay,
the latest one, but the repo one is from all the way back from 2023.
Okay.
I have still not managed to compile it because I went straight into patching EDK2 and adding custom drivers to it. I didn't even check if the latest one compiles.
I see. Well, I do not know who our go-to person is. It was Rebecca Cran at one point. It was originally Peter. That always needs some love. I believe VirtIO sock came up recently as sort of a absolute cheat button to get a whole bunch of things into a VM. I don't think any work's been done with it, but it was certainly compelling.
There was a report in the last quarterly report on the project. And once, if it, or maybe even the one before, but
if you can find that, awesome. Punching through, Hans, I know at one point you looked at, say, the time counter, which would be a paravirtualized time counter to reduce exits. Remind me where we ended up on that.
That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was probably the first thing we discussed.
I know that Vitaly did some work on that, and that never worked. And at that time, I didn't ever look again at it. I could, theoretically.
Okay, we'll get to your cool list, but I have not heard a single thing from Vitaly at all. And related, thank you. Ooh, I see a nifty link. Thank you, Jan. Rock and roll. Did you have a chance to look any more at CBIOS? Which the more we do not need it, the more we need it.
I haven't looked.
Haven't looked. Okay. Because EDK CSM kind of went away, and there is a CBIOS port for Zen and FreeBSD. So if you search CBIOS, there it is. I do not know if those can be bolted into one another. So bolted into bhyve rather than Zen, but that is fascinating. And gosh, did you get any responses on libvdsk, which allows for, say, VMDK and QCOW2 images? I'm guessing no, but it's one of those little topics that just never quite gets hammered home. Thank you for the VirtIO VSOC. Ooh, thank you, Jan. You are doing great with those links. Sorry to multitask here, but that's kind of the nature of this beast. Code. Jan, do you think that's worth looking at today, or there it is? And off we go.
Looks like it's still in active development, so I don't know if there's something you could actually use and expect to get some use out of, or if you would at best help debug it. I don't know.
Got it. And of course, just pull your name off the list if you don't want to be listed. It's kind of, everything's here pretty open, and just let me know if you do not want it open. So, quick poll to the group. You each have an equal say. Are there other features you just think are relatively low-hanging fruit that we should focus on trying to hammer home for upcoming releases that I've not covered here?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
That's cool. I've long considered the GPU pass-through ecosystem one of those holy grails to focus on, along with live migration, but that's like taking a classroom, taking a test and switching it to another classroom, and hoping you don't lose a single beat. Go ahead.
Those are both not low-hanging fruit, I don't think.
They're not, but there's been various progress in various forms, some of which we'll discuss today.
Absolutely. I'm just saying. You mentioned low-hanging fruit, and neither of those are that category.
Oh, correct. But fortunately, they might be at like 80% along as opposed to 0%. So,
and I will dance a jig when they get done.
Sweet. Speaking of which, before we
By the
get
way,
to yes,
I looked at the current state of the VSOC work, and all
Yes.
the changes are to the guest kernel driver, so there's no work yet on bhyve providing VirtIO VSOC devices, but on FreeBSD making use of hypervisors which do.
Got it. Cool.
But if understood correctly, the other one should follow, but that's what's been worked on already.
Thank you for investigating that. That contextualizes it perfectly in time. So this is perennially a topic of what we want. And what's your second link you just added?
The view where I inferred that from.
Okay, cool. That said, we all want something at some point, but feel free to chime in through whatever means you want, be it social media, be it direct writing, you name it. But from yesterday's enterprise working group call, Tomek, it sounds like you made some progress with CUDA on FreeBSD as a user. It would be great to get a just summary of what can and can't be done in February of 2025.
Cool. Hello world. So
hello.
I'm using, packages that are already available. It's 14.2 release, P1 right now.
Actually, I'll put this link in the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, let her in.
Yeah, I'm mostly, like embedded systems developer, designer, and firmware developer, but I also quite often work with CAD, like KiCad, FreeCAD, and stuff. So the 3D acceleration is quite important. And until release 13, my Radeon RX 580 worked pretty well, but with 14 I had the problems. So I switched to DRM 6.1, and still I had kind of stability issues. So it's like just to get things working, I just replaced that card with second-hand NVIDIA GTX 1060. So it's kind of popular, cheap, card. And I have installed the drivers. It's 550 right now, the binary driver from NVIDIA, and things just work. You need to create a Xorg configuration. I'm using Xorg. And so when things were working, there are some problems I will mention, but I was trying to see if CUDA is working here. So looks like there is this package Xorg NVIDIA libs, and that provides most of the packages that are Linux based to NVIDIA driver that is BSD based. But also there is this magical package like libs6shim. So that's the missing point, that when you install it, you will get this application NVSGL run, and this NVSGL run is a kind of wrapper that then can launch any other application that requires CUDA or OpenCL. So in the forum, you can see, my quite short journey to make it working. And for example, there is this application CLPeak that can, measure the efficiency of the OpenCL stack. So if you wrap this CLPeak with NV SGL run, it works. The card is detected. The condition is you need to have this NV SGL run from the libs6 shim package, and then you need this xorg NVIDIA libs. So that's how it works. The problems I encountered is that the drivers are binary and they are in quite specific version. You can see the version is 550, 127.05, something, right? So I also had this Linux Lighter setup with the Bootstrap environment that I was using, for example, to use the binary releases of the 3D printer slicer. I use, to convert the 3D models to programs for my 3D printing. So then I realized it was working on the Radeon driver before, but it stopped working with the NVIDIA. So it turned out that every component, from top bottom needs to use the same libraries versions. So for example, I had Debian 12 and Debian 12 use 535 version of the drivers, while the BSD use 550. So that was the reason it didn't work. And the solution here is to use the packages provided, by the with the ports. But then you don't have some, Linux libraries to require to run the other stuff. So that's kind of the problem here, the compatibility packages.
Can you go into your Linux compatibility environment on FreeBSD and then download the NVIDIA drivers and the exact same version FreeBSD provides as a package and install it?
No, not really, because Debian use different version, and I might try to compile it, myself.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And that might work.
Just download the tarball.
Yeah,
it's annoying, of course.
I'm just using, the provided packages, and also another problem is we are using older CentOS 7 Linux packages and the new Rocky Linux 9. Okay, so here is also the hint on how to build the Linux NVIDIA libs if you are using the Rocky Linux 9 packages. So you just need to update the ATC makeconf, and set the default versions, and that works out of the box. So Tomaki helped me with forum, and Fluffy takes care of the packages, for the Rocky Linux. Right now, I'm in a situation when I really have thousands of tasks every day, and I just need something that works,
Cool. Yep. This is great. And you said Fluffy was helping?
Yes. And Tomaki Aoki. On the forum, you can see everybody that, helped me, hinted me, and verified it works before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and February 4th, 2025. Cool. This is fresh. In Unix years.
So this NVSGL run is some wrapper, you have this kind of PA DSP that can wrap OSS application to use Pulse Audio, for example. So this is some kind of wrapper.
Okay. Did I hear
I just read the README for the libc6 shim GitHub repository here, and
yeah.
Oh my God, is that nasty?
Okay.
I mean, it's a neat hack, but
Man, it
whoa.
comes from Linux.
No. Let's
What could you
basically.
expect?
It's kind of using an LD preload exploit to pretend you're almost glibc, so most stuff works.
Goodness.
Oh,
Okay.
so that I suspect it then hijacks all the normal symbols for making system calls and maps them to the FreeBSD system calls, so that you can basically run Linux shared libraries and maybe even executables without the Linux ABI, if I understand correctly. So you're not using the in-kernel emulation, but of the system calls, but you run basically a native FreeBSD library, and the runtime linker just pre-binds all the usual calling points or
Whatever.
for system call instructions and maps into a different system call number, basically. Or
Yes, man, it's that simple.
it's
Okay. Well, that said,
I
is
get that it allows you to do something which you normally can't, because now you can really link Linux libraries, especially ones only provided as binary, into FreeBSD executables. But oh my, that's
Well, it's
I
a
think I need a
problem.
shower.
Which direction you don't look, you can see the that 4 letters. So it's like either
But
you are using unstable and unreliable really the drivers that are open source, and otherwise you are tied to binary drivers like blobs, where you cannot change anything. And I just noticed, because I'm also using this HDMI Max multiplexer, because I have different computers. I'd like to see them on one screen and one keyboard, one mouse.
Sure.
So it's like I have some laptops, embedded systems. So I just noticed when I switch the channel, then my main screen disappears, and with the old card, it was possible to, I'm using Enlightenment window manager. So the another screen I'm using, it stayed, untouched. And right now, everything swaps from the main screen to the second screen, and probably that the configuration of the Xorg, or maybe just the
No.
driver does it for me.
I think the difference is because it's a blob driver, NVIDIA supports HDCP, so content encryption via HDMI. And if you then run a MUX, basically you break that encrypted link and have to renegotiate. So the switching is no longer transparent to the computer. If you disable support for that, it should work again, and you don't lose much unless you have a whole chain to basically attest that you have an encrypted link all the way into your display, so that you can use official playback software for DRM infected media. Or you just run it in M player and it works anyway.
okay. Tomek,
All right.
did you identify anything that could be better upstream, be it documentation, be it some library needs to be updated, or there need to be policies on keeping things in sync, or what would help?
This package.
Providing Linux packages to match the FreeBSD host driver packages,
Okay,
and
one moment.
documenting which lines of the NVIDIA driver have this level of support would make it possible for users to not dread any package upgrade for everyone.
I mean, the packages on BSD, the Linux packages on BSD are working fine. The problem I had was with the manually created Debian 12, the bootstrap environment. Because then with that, the bootstrap, I had this, APT application for package management, and whatever I need to test from Linux on my BSD box, I could just install, the package with one command, and I didn't have to, play with some compilations or, versions mismatch and stuff like that. So Well,
Mhm.
I didn't really need it right now, so I didn't sit at this problem, but probably the recompilation of the libraries should fix the problem. But the problem wasn't there before when I was using, like DRM61, or maybe I don't know, maybe there is a different solution, but clearly, the BSD driver kernel tells me, the application that tries to connect use different version. It's the
Yes.
535
So
and not 550.
same thing can happen if you just basically upgrade your driver and not reboot, or not unload the kernel module and load the new kernel module, if you're willing to do it like that.
Yeah.
So if you have your NVIDIA drivers and the kernel module, they have to stay in sync on the same release.
Yes, exactly. The
And
version match must be the
what
same.
would be required for that to work is that you basically, the cleaner FreeBSD centric view would be to say, okay, we need Linux compatibility driver packages for the at least some of the release lines of the drivers supported like that. So basically, let's say over long-term stable driver, not the gaming drivers, the one we're tracking. And then you would need for the Red Hat, Rocky Linux 9, a package as a compat package for Linux for that, and keep it in sync in the port tree with a note in the
I
port.
just
Hey, every
write
time
this.
you update this port, you also have to do this so that these two stay in sync. Or the less nice way from a FreeBSD point of view would be to have a special port, which could be some kind of meta port, which would then pull in the
Yeah, Metaport would
old
be
port,
nice.
so that you have an old port, so that on FreeBSD you can stay on the driver. And because NVIDIA provides them, even if you don't get all the latest cards supported and no bug fixes for even security bugs if you stay on an old driver, of course. But hey, you could have a FreeBSD port which just gets frozen and moves in lockstep with the Linux compat package instead of providing one which follows FreeBSD closely. That's probably easier to do for a FreeBSD user or developer to basically keep a specific version of the port as it existed at one time, because it probably existed. And if so, the port is normally just a few changes applied and doesn't need much work per tiny little driver update until it doesn't need a major work. But most of the
Yeah,
time, it's easy to
yeah,
update the or downgrade so that you could just have a version of you need available as a port, so that you don't have to go the annoying route of downloading the tarball from NVIDIA and installing it,
yeah.
because then
So answering the Michael's question, what could be improved? So I guess the information about how to set up CUDA, on BSD, could be added to handbook, because the wiki is a bit messy, and it doesn't explain a lot. And as Jan suggested, maybe a single meta port, to just install everything for me is also a very nice idea. And I prefer this approach, and I like this approach. It could be easier to bootstrap something on a fresh system. And right now it's just like PKG install NVIDIA driver, like this lib6 shim and NVIDIA libs or XOR NVIDIA libs, something like that. What was the name? I always forget this magical name, like lib6 shim. It's totally unrelated to NVIDIA. But also there is this package NVSGL run that grabs the CUDA applications. So this is the very important package.
Is that on screen right now?
Yes, NVSGL run. Yeah.
Got it.
Did you get some of the bigger CUDA applications working, or did you stop at testing certain benchmark tools like the ones mentioned in the report?
Yeah,
In the post.
I also played with John and Hashcat, of course, just to see what's the efficiency. So I didn't finish anything, but for example, John told me, and I had to rebuild it. I'm not sure if it's already has the OpenCL enabled by default, the package. Maybe with this kind of flavors it is available. But it took it told me it will take like 4 days, not 6 weeks. On pretty old, on the pretty old graphic card that can be
Well,
bought
sure,
like for
32-bit
100
integer
euros.
math is what a GPU is good at after floating point.
What was the name of that tool or game or whatever? Hash something?
Hashcat. It's like cat, like the animal.
Meow. Okay.
It's a rainbow table builder.
Cool.
Just don't write it. I told that.
Ah.
It's some, benchmark and
It's a
computation
benchmark.
stuff.
Very well. Very
Yeah.
well. I hear
It's
you.
an advanced password recovery tool. It's
Yeah,
not an
recovery.
attacker's work everyday tool to just
Well, yeah,
badly hashed passwords.
to be totally honest, it was my file and I forgot the password, so that's my fault.
Perfectly legit. That's an info sexual routine. Anything else on CUDA at this time, or any questions for Tomac?
It would be fun to see if you could get something more complex like Plex or Jellyfin with CUDA transcoding running, so that you don't have to pass through GPU if you want not just NVEnc or DEC and VAAP, but full CUDA support for higher quality transcoding. But it's a niche use case, but it's a bigger test case, I think.
Amen.
Transcoding's probably less niche than building rainbow tables. Just saying.
Yeah, but it's still a niche use case, but it is a larger test of if the CUDA ecosystem works. That configuration.
Wait. I will just see how, if we are talking about this, I just launched Blender.
Yeah.
And maybe, stuff like Blender could be sped up.
Of course. That's important.
Blender would be a good example if you get CUDA Blender ray tracing support working.
Oh, look, Blender. Oh, look.
Yes, CUDA.
A movie from your neighborhood. Go ahead.
So CUDA is not detected if I run Blender without NVSGL run Blender and see right now.
Would it be that that the support isn't enabled at build time? Because whoever wrote report knows that it's supported on FreeBSD and disabled it.
That seems logical to me.
Yeah, but Blender has it built in by default probably, and maybe because someone already made that. No compatible GPU found 4 cycles. Requires NVIDIA GPU with compute compatibility version 3. So I started this with NVSGL run. So, just like that, it doesn't work. Maybe it needs some tweaking. But Blender and stuff like that, could be improved.
Got it. Cool. Think of your questions for Tomek. Thank you so much for so far giving the best CUDA on FreeBSD tutorial on the planet, it seems. Even if it was kind of by accident. I love it.
I was just playing around. Other folks helped me and, created the packages. So I just, installed package and that's it.
Excellent. So let's segue into Alexei's work. This has come up in the last 2 calls, and Alexei kindly helped me get a whole bunch of things working, such as a B-Link supporting Windows 10 and 11 and Linux Mint doing iGPU, built-in GPU, integrated GPU pass-through with zero BIOS modifications and just very selective firmware files from various places. But you've also been working on utilities to extract those. Do you want to just summarize your news of the hour?
EDK2 not building and bhyve crashing. That's all the news I have for you now.
It is not building. Okay.
I'm trying
Yeah.
to load proprietary AMD drivers, and it's just crashing bhyve.
Okay.
Is that a screenshot here?
Sure.
Just-
Either drop it in Docker or share if you really want.
Oh, I can actually set it as text. Never mind.
Okay.
Here we go.
Unhandled memory access. Well, okay, thank you for that. Oh, that's worth noting.
Guys, did you
That-
make, by the way, the pass-through of the GPU to the bhyve? Because then, you know, the CUDA could be used inside, and I didn't
Yeah, that
manage
works.
to.
This error, this happening when they're trying to load the AMD PBS setup dxe.efi driver, which is I just looked inside of it, and inside of the bytecode, it is referencing some GPU initialization. So I'm trying to get it to initialize an AMD GPU inside of DK2 while it's booting, but it just crashes the whole thing up.
So for those who want to follow this, I'll drop the link in the chat. Corvin kindly gave some high-level guidance long ago, but I've built upon that and been basically slamming in, not always in the right place, everything I've learned with Alexei. So I dumped in all my notes on all the preparation you want to do, because you will absolutely thank yourself. And I thank you, Alexei, for showing that, hey, what if you use a USB to HDMI adapter or vice versa, and then watch the remote system in, say, OBS or your webcam software of choice, meaning you get to see what's going on without maybe being in two different rooms at once. I've got dozens of points here that I've found useful, be it how to set up Windows with auto unattend XML, so you've got like RDP enabled and various things, and ping enabled so you can actually find the thing. Actually, that's one I might want to verify I've got. A whole bunch of things on imaging, on and on. Oh, did I? Yes, I put it in chat. You've got a CUDA link copy. So that said, I was very pleasantly surprised that on a Ryzen system, I could bring up, say, Linux Mint and Windows with very little trouble. I'm learning a whole bunch in the process. Intel was ironically a little more difficult, and I am just as of early this morning experimenting with an NVIDIA card and just taking a stab at that. So yeah. Andrew, I think I brought up and did not finish checking the Illumos bhyve manual page. I sure hope you have, gateway timeout for illumos.org. I certainly hope you have some amount of PCI pass-through and ROM support, because if you do, then it's worth going through the same steps, given that Alexei and others have pounded their head against this. There were some
Yeah, I'm not
fascinating
sure.
surprises. Go ahead.
I'm not sure when I'm going to get to that task. It's a awfully one of those tasks that I would like to do, but I'm not super. It's not a high priority.
I don't doubt that. The iOS bhyve manual. About that, if much of it is put on a silver platter for you, and you then get to just focus on the intricacies of it as opposed to starting from complete scratch, that may help. And heck, I may try to take a moment to spin up an OmniOS system and see how far I get. So, and thank you, Tomek. Here's your post. You rock.
I mean,
And
I have to get hardware into that system to even test that.
Does it have an iGPU that might be passable?
I mean,
cool. Anyway, so
it's got a Matrox.
Ooh, nifty. And Alexei, for what it's worth, have you done anything with a Matrox server? I'm guessing GPU pass through.
No,
Cool. Me neither.
Not
I
in
have
2
for-
decades.
Not in 2 decades. I like that. And this trim command for NVMe was from like this morning or evening.
I already
his time.
uploaded to my scripts.
Excellent. Awesome.
Sure.
So this segues into Corvin's work. So this is ongoing. We learn something every day or two, and occasionally have a new tool every day or two, but it's a thing. It's working. And looking at the OmniOS page, let's look for ROM. Oh, hit it. Search. Switch. Anyway, has anyone who hasn't spoken experimented with GPU pass-through? ROM device. Let's see. LPCI device. Yep. Pass-through and ROMs. Yes, that looks supported in Illuma, so that's worth poking at. Okay.
Do you know if the Ryzen 5 family works? It's like Ryzen 9950X. It's not this one 3D, but even newer. So the 3D was Zen 4, and the newer one is Zen 5. So it has some even lower power, usage.
Is this an example, the 7940HS that Stefano has?
No, it's
even newer.
Strong. Yeah.
Well, I'll send you a mailing label if you really want to get one over here. I don't know. It would just take someone diving into it. Go ahead, Alexei.
Yeah, it should work. After getting the GOB driver and stuff.
So I'm considering upgrading my over 10 years old PC, and if I'm going to buy something, it should be something good right now. So I compared the power usage and the efficiency. So I also have like Mac Studio with this Max M2 core. It's ARM64, but it's like 2 to 4 times faster than my desktop PC. Yeah. And people reported recently the M4 Max from Apple, and this Ryzen 9950X is, comparable or even a bit faster with this M4, and still, this Intel architecture. So most packages will work, the binaries and stuff, and for other stuff on ARM, I can use ARM stuff. Because there are still problems, with porting and building and running, and who has time for that?
Right.
People just want results from me.
I hear you.
Oh, by the way, I just remembered from one of the previous calls.
Yes.
Somebody has mentioned an AMD Power 9 or Power 10 server and trying to do GPU pass-through on that.
AMD Power, as in Power PC?
No,
or...
IBM Power.
IBM Power, right.
IBM
that
Power.
might have been Eva.
Yeah,
and
Eva.
The goal
Power
would
PC?
be GPU on Power PC. And of course, that raises a question about their virtualization options. Although IBM kind of pioneered all this long ago.
On the bigger systems, you can't even really run bare metal. You're always running in logical partition mode, where you at least need a very thin minimum hypervisor to provide the abstractions operating systems are supposed to target.
The Raptor system you can run on bare metal.
Yes, the Raptor, but the bigger IBM systems, the scale-up boxes. I think in theory you can run Linux with some tinkering, but basically the suggested deployment is to always have their little, basically purely partitioning hypervisor and stuff in there.
Tomek, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but I came across this Ryzen AI system that had a most remarkable pass mark rating.
Probably not.
Pass mark. Okay.
what I want to buy is, it costs around 600, euros or dollars. So it's
That's
not really probably,
describing this. Okay.
yeah, some Terminator that will cost like thousands and billions and of gold. So I
Hmm.
just need something that works. And there was this Threadripper architecture with like 64 CPUs or 128 CPUs, but it turned out it will cost like at least 10,000.
Oh goodness, yeah.
So forget it.
That's the latest Threadripper for you. Anyway, cool. That is great progress.
My last question
Please.
regarding the bhyve, because you are all familiar, so
You don't. I checked already.
Okay, what was the question? What's the answer? Or we have the answer and not the question.
I went to your list and did a search for streets. Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted.
No worries. Cool. Well, repeat the question, Tomek.
okay, so the question is the USB pass-through. So that's my most common use case scenario when I have some software and I need to attach some, like, I don't know, development board or something like this, and to test the debug probe or something. So in bhyve, I had to buy dedicated PCI Express USB controller, and then I pass the whole controller, to the bhyve, and that could be the problem on the new hardware because every single modern mainboard has like only one PCI Express slot, at most two. So it's only for GPU, and it's like the hardware vendors are only making hardware for gamers,
Mm-hmm.
And if I put
Let him finish.
the graphic card to the slot, I will not have anything else for any of my mass storage controller, network devices or the USB host. So the question if it's possible to pass like internal controller or just one port, like it was possible with the VirtualBox or device.
So
It's like all the USB ports are split into like two, and then the rest of the ports are in a separate controller. So there's going to be one of the controllers which is going to control only two USB ports, which are usually above the Ethernet port.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those
And
are the two ports directly tied to the chipset normally, and then you have an additional USB controller chip somewhere on the main board.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So-
the USB ports which are tied to the chipset, they're usually located like at a much lower like PCI option, and then they're also, if you're looking at IMMU groups on Linux, they're located inside the same IMMU group as a lot of the other hardware on the board. By the way, if you're talking about passing through, like if you pass through one thing, then you need to pass through everything else, which is that is in the same group. On FreeBSD, you don't really need to do that because there's no IMMU groups like as a thing on FreeBSD for now. On Linux, if you pass through one device, which is in the same IMMU group as some other devices, then you need to pass through every single device from that group. On FreeBSD, it just doesn't matter. There is a
Well,
patch kernel that ignores that. Makes it ignore groups, but it makes the kernel a bit unstable, as far as I know.
And Tomek, to answer your question, from a recent call, there was this a blog post about using USB IP with bhyve, which is clever, and which I forget if it was through QEMU or what. Here's a blog post.
Yes,
I can drop it in chat there.
That's what you said.
The USB over IP, right?
Clever. Here, I'll drop it in chat. So there's that. I thought, well, that is a way. They were using a software-defined radio.
Cool.
By the way, you really want to pass through all of the USB generations when it comes to controller pass-through. So just passing through the USB 3 controller is not enough. You also have to pass through the USB 1 and 2 controllers, which make up the whole system, because
Yeah.
otherwise your system is not going to be a USB spec compliant host.
Mhm.
Oh, good
When
point.
one virtual machine has the high speed controller and the other one has the super speed controller and the third one has the low and high speed controller. So yeah, that's not going to work like you expect it to work. Unless you
Yeah.
expect it to work not at all.
Maybe I should invent like the USB host over the USB.
USB over
Well,
USB.
I wonder what would happen when you try to bifurcate that 16x slot into 4x slots with a breakout cable.
Oh, goodness.
If you could pass through individual subsets of lanes to different guests, or if everything which was supposed to be 1 by 16 slot has to go to the same, which could be interesting if you have, because you can get M.2 NICs and SSDs, of course, and a bunch of other things these days. So yeah, maybe, or
Yeah.
to put 4 SSDs in there and pass them through to 2 different SSDs or something. I guess that would be interesting to test, but
I look forward
needs
to your
a
blog post on that.
needs the right hardware. Send me the hardware and I will write a blog post about what works and didn't in exchange.
Well, those
Okay.
like $8 M.2 cards, like 4 cards that
No, the
magically-
SSDs to test that with.
Ah, yes. Okay.
I have
Other,
to
yes, please.
admit, I'm a
Andrew.
little confused with this comment that there's only one PCIe on modern boards. That is not at all what I've seen. I mean, many
Mhm.
boards seem to
On
have
this,
2, 3 slots.
the small form factor boards.
Yeah, the 2
But-
slots. I can tell you Asus ROG Strix X 870E, for instance. It's dedicated, to this new CPU. And there is another board with 2 PCI Express slots. So it's not like there are like, I don't know, 6 slots that I have right now, or like 6 slots like on the Threadripper mainboard. It's usually 1 or 2 only.
Hmm.
So
On
maybe
what-
2, but maybe the second one will not be X16.
Of course not. How could it be given what the good hubs in the modern desktop CPUs have when it comes to PCI lanes? You basically have enough PCI lanes for 1 or 2 SSDs and a fast GPU. And when you're out of lanes without Maxes, and since PCIe 3, the prices for PCIe switches have gone through the roof because the remaining players established this as a niche high-end feature. So unlike earlier Gen 1 and Gen 2 boards, you won't find prosumer boards with PCIe switches anymore because a PCI switching chip costs about as much as a cheap main board.
Ooh,
Yeah,
could
but
you
this
use a serial
mainboard is
mouse
like,
and ask for serial?
it's like 4 times more expensive than the basic boards. It costs
Mhm.
another like 600 euros.
One of the ways, if you have this space and can afford a little bit of idle power, is to get a reasonably sized server mainboard with an Epic CPU. Doesn't have to be one of the big ones or the latest one, but those have a ridiculous number of PCIe lanes, and even if they don't have all of them broken out as full-length slots, just because it doesn't fit on a on an ATX mainboard, on a normal full-sized one, and you need to go to something like the super ATX stuff like EE, SMB
All
and
right.
something.
All right, I have a
And if you
tower
do that, you have
casing.
lots of slots, but And there are some ATX and even micro ATX or smaller, something like DITX, so slightly bit bigger than an ITX mainboard. Tons of PCIe connectivity is normally broken out through something like OQ-Link or other connectors. So depending on what you want to use it for U.3 slots or something like that, it works fine. You need a cable anyway. For U.2, okay, you need another cable. For PCIe cards, it's annoying because there you need a kind of breakout board where you can plug in the data lanes and the bus power. And at that point, it's no longer as compact unless you want to build a Rubik's Cube-like assembly.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to have
but-
lots of PCIe lanes, you obviously are not going to be on a super small one of these boards. It would have to be a larger board just to space constraints.
Yeah, I'm just surprised, the old board had several slots, and I could expand whatever I need. And right now, it's like I only have 1 or 2 slots. I get everything that I don't need, and I cannot expand it easily, with what I need.
So yeah,
I mean, you can get boards with more slots. They're just the larger, more expensive boards.
The problem is that the bigger desktop/gaming /low-end workstation boards have gotten ridiculously expensive over the last few generations.
That's what I mean.
Because there's not that much use for them, and because they have to put in a bunch of expensive stuff like a PCIe switch, or to make it work well, or at the very least something simpler like a bunch of muxes and so on, and routing, and there's so little onboard. Whereas with an Epic mainboard, just go to the product page, look up the manual, look up the block diagram of the mainboards for the better basically desktop socket boards which document which chips are on there, or at least generally document what is on there. You will find that it's really a bunch of support chips to break out all the little things which are missing. Whereas if you have just one Epic CPU and no chipset at all on a server board, you have, yes, it means you only get 2 USB ports and you only get like either 2 or, depending how you configure it, I think 8 or 10 SATA ports. But in theory, you could also configure at least some of the Epics to be simulated SCSI instead of SATA. But you often find that as the one support chip and then a dual port 10 gig NIC, and that's it basically. So you have your socket, memory DIMMs, and then just PCIe routed to everything, and a NIC and a SCSI controller, and that's it.
Yeah,
Those
that's
boards
what
can
I
be
need.
fairly affordable, and the CPUs for them aren't that expensive either. So if you don't need overclocking support and are prepared to run with maybe registered DIMMs, then everything works out.
DIMMs, so does it mean like no SCC or something like that?
It means that these CPUs only support ECCR DIMM. So you have to have registered DIMMs, not unregistered. Which means your memory is
more
clocked a
expensive.
few megahertz slower, effectively because you cannot get the fastest, lowest latency memory. But therefore,
And what
on the other
frequencies?
hand, you get the option of running 2 DIMMs per channel, which, okay, in a desktop with an 8-channel CPU, that's not that relevant. The older AMD parts have something called a quad-channel optimized SKUs, which are basically mostly deactivated parts with, I think, 32 cores, or in earlier generations, even just 16 cores in the upper end of that SKU line, but they're cheaper, require less power, and basically, if I read correctly between the lines, basically 2 of the 4 dies are pure dummies. The other ones can drive the IO the other ones can drive the IO chip just fine. But they don't profit as much, and you don't have the last level cache from the other dice and so on. But hey,
Okay.
costs less to
awesome
buy, it
beat.
costs less to run because it wastes less power and it fits a niche.
Yeah. The one important thing with RAM is that I need like 128 gigabytes at least, because then
It's not a problem.
I create this kind of RAM disk, and put all the source files inside the RAM disk, and build everything in the RAM disk, and that's the fastest way possible,
To build
And
what?
then
You mentioned KiCad and other embedded goodies.
yeah, embedded stuff like tools, compilers,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
The operating systems, like porting BSD or Linux or compiling, this kind of. Normally, I work with Nuttx RTOS, so even on my desktop right now, it builds in 17 seconds,
Ah.
But for example, I had to build something else recently, and I had to have this very specific compiler, so it took like 5 hours to build it,
Cool. Other questions from those who haven't said much, if you've got them? Mike, Zimon, I hope you found this helpful. I absolutely appreciate that deep dive into CUDA, given that it keeps coming up but hasn't had people getting their feet wet with it.
Yeah, same for me. The CUDA thing is interesting. Did anyone get those deep learning, machine learning libraries to work on FreeBSD using CUDA, like PyTorch and whatever, JX and that stuff?
That is an interesting question. Here, I'll put that up here with the Blender goodies.
I'd be interested in that. That's one reason.
And pick some names if you will. Was it PyTorch?
That stuff.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
is there a
PyTorch is the most. No, it's like Python, right? Though not an.
Yeah. So, is there any benchmark in PyTorch?
PyTorch or JX is, I think, the other one. Stable Diffusion. I don't know. JAX.
Yeah.
The
keyboard's the worst on the planet. Cool. That's something that's definitely been touched on in the enterprise working group calls, but no one has come forward with something. So I very much look forward to whatever you have to report. That's outside my personal area of specialty, but I do want to keep working on GPU and ARM64. Someone mentioned, maybe it was also you, on ARM64. Take a look at the wiki. If you've got docs to add them if you can, or ask others, such as myself.
So another topic maybe related.
Yes.
I recently bought this power meter because I'm like running the FreeBSD 14.2 on Raspberry Pi 02W. So it's the lightest one. And the FreeBSD runs there fine on 64 gigabytes of SD card. And the reason is, for example, for this Nuttx RTOS project, it turns out like there are hundreds of commits monthly. I'm part of the PMC. It's the Apache project, and it supports over 15 architectures, different architectures. There are like 360 boards, different boards like this, and over 1,600 configurations. So recently, we realized that there are too many breaking changes, and we were mostly building on CI and QEMU. But there were some changes recently, for example, that changed some registers, and QEMU didn't catch this. So right now we are trying to build this, distributed test farm, that will be building this firmware and running on the real world hardware. So this is why it's like I bought this USB power meter, just to see what is the power consumption.
Ah, I see. Do you have a link for that device? It's hard to see in the tiny thumbnail video.
There are many more.
Okay.
It's like some cheap one for $50, like FNIRSE. This one is probably the best sounding from reviews, and it can, you can attach it to PC and, plot the characteristics or something like this.
Cool. You had an example project that's got too many changes to keep track of. You said it was either Python or Apache project, if I heard you correctly.
It's the Nuttx RTOS.
Nuttx, N-A-T-I-X?
And November Uniform Tango X-ray.
I can get a text insert point. November UT. Oh, thank you.
I just pasted
yes,
in
I
the
appreciate
chat.
that. Awesome. And you.
So there are people
don't even know how to
working on
pronounce it.
Linux, and I'm working on BSD.
Cool. And did you just say Apache has a real-time OS?
The Apache Foundation.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's under
It's
umbrella.
an embedded operating system,
Cool.
real-time OS for microcontrollers. More or less bigger microcontrollers, that is.
Does it support
Yes.
either AMD 64 or ARM64, and we could try it under bhyve?
Yes, that would be great. It supports, wait a moment, there is a documentation and you have a list of the supported platforms.
Okay, cool. Well,
So it's like ARM, ARM64, Microchip IVR, SIVA, HC MIPS, MISOC, OpenRISC, Renesas, RISC-V, Spark, 3-core, Intel, AMD 64, Extensa, Z16, Z80. What is it was the RTOS initially with the BSD license. So that was kind of tiny BSD for the microcontrollers. Then it went
The links I
under.
sent were for AI and machine learning.
I see.
I accidentally sent them to a different message.
Okay.
I already tried llama.cp on FreeBSD. It works, but only in the CPU mode.
As in
ConfUI
CPM,
still
like
have not
ancient?
tried. Huh?
As in CPM, like DOS
No,
era?
llama.c++.
Oh, okay, cool. Keep the links coming.
It's C++ runtime for GGUF files or something. I don't really know how it works.
Okay.
All I know is that it does math and spews out text from files.
So, what may be interesting to know is that some embedded software for 32-bit ARM, because FAMP1 is basically the same between ARM 7A and ARM v6M, is compatible so that you can run unprivileged instructions natively, which allows, for example, the macOS Stellaris 4th system to run on FreeBSD and on microcontrollers. For something like Nuttx, if you want to basically run it at single board computer speeds, at least the unprivileged regression tests, instead of running it in an emulator, that would be possible, which is probably 10 to 100 times faster for micro benchmarks. But you can't, of course, execute privileged instructions in user space.
So basically, it can fit in like 32 kilo flash and 8 kilo RAM MCU.
Yeah, it fits in one cache.
Yeah, but also, we were considering recently to make this RTOS a bootloader for something. So you might be also interested or try to make this out, make, the bootloader based on Nuttx, for example, as compared to U-bot or something,
Can one download a bootable appliance to try under bhyve on their lunch break?
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Get Nuttx. Okay. OS apps. Let's
OS is
see.
the core OS and apps is the
Okay.
application. So it's like the build time configuration, and then it's merged into one tiny single firmware file.
Is there anything pre-built, or you roll your own?
There was a demo on. Let me see
I saw a
online.
demo. I didn't know if they meant like virtual or what. Let's see. Demo. Online demo could mean many things.
Yeah, it might work. So there is this WebAssembly stuff, so you can,
Okay.
you name or something. Yeah, you name -a. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well.
Yeah.
We all like parlor tricks. Cool. Well, if you get that work under bhyve, do report back. Thank you. Anyway, other topics. And I see the FNIRSI. Ooh, okay. Sweet. That said, Hans, if you can stick around a second, I'd love to catch up with
Sorry,
you.
it's
Yes,
not really about. The goal is like to maybe use jails, maybe use bhyve to virtualize the build and runtime process.
Okay.
For example, if you want to automatically pull the PR from the GitHub, then it might contain code or scripts that are untrusted. So if you run it on your home network or the company network, that's risky. So maybe it's about something more like creating one-time run environment that you will bootstrap everything inside, and then fetch the code, build it, run it, extract the results and forget it, something like this.
So CI has been a hot topic on the jail calls because with the OCI work stabilizing, any kind of CI has been attractive, be it tiny, be it disposable, be it limited feature or limited surface. So yeah, check out those videos.
Okay.
Anything else before we wrap this up? Well, we're exactly at what, an hour and a half in? Would anyone
hour
like
and a
the
half.
honors? Ooh, Andrew, I think you just volunteered.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week and weekend.
Oh, the
Thank you for
enthusiasm.
invitation.